adjusting the retained fund balance because of that mistake. So the projected fund balance, once we remove all of the funding for FY25 is, between 30,000 and 50,000, depending on what we do with the retained fund balance.
So Kelly, in the special ed section of expenses, oh no, forget. I'm gonna hold my comment. I'm not gonna say it.
Okay. Yes.
Are we budgeting a larger amount for the vocational education for the coming year, do you know?
That's a good question. I'm not sure at this moment in time. I don't have that, but I can look. Whoops. Wrong way.
Scary part is that
Yes.
you know where to look.
We did. Right now, this year, we have budgeted 47,000, and we have 73,000 budgeted for next year, for FY25.
Okay, so essentially trying to budget it flat to actuals.
We do, yes. Any other questions?
So when we look at the revenue estimates that we have with the budget, we usually estimate around $200,000 for the unreserved fund balance, so there is some potential movement. I think we've used that 200,000 as kind of a conservative number.
Right.
And I think we're still comfortable, even though this is going to be in the 60-ish range.
Well,
There's
it's
a lot
still
of things
early
to
in the year,
change,
so
right, between
I
now and the
anticipate
end of
that
the
number
year.
going much higher. I just, not at this point.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of things encumbered that we haven't resolved,
Right,
so, yeah.
right.
But I think 200,000 is a good number, yeah.
Do you expect the open positions to remain open, or?
Some of them, some we filled, but some of them will remain open all year potentially, and some of them we're using contracted services to fill those positions, and the paras are always fluctuating. But we are getting better with the paras, so I feel like next year might be a different look for all of the districts, so.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Close those. Okay, the one thing I didn't open was the warrant. Just give me one. I thought I opened it. The next item on our agenda is the collective bargaining agreement for the professional staff. I'm sorry, I'm just looking. I thought I had everything open. I just needed one more file. All right, 3 more. So the way I did distribute a draft warrant, and the way the warrant breaks down, we'll start with the support staff agreement and then move to the professional staff agreement. And so you'll notice in the draft that was presented, it is presented right now, indicating that there will be 3 years of expenses identified, which would indicate a standardized contract. But I will turn it over to Tom Solon.
Do you have any guess when Brian's due to arrive?
He said he was running late, so
Guys, really hoping to
I don't.
have him here.
Well, if you
there-
want, we can kind of move on to some other things, and we can circle
Yeah,
back,
if
just to
there
give him a
is
few
stuff,
more
I don't
minutes.
want to just stall, but if
Yep, no problem. What I will mention is, while I believe the window remains open, the current draft of the warrant includes, aside from the operating budget, the SAU budget, the capital maintenance fund, and the contingency. There are 2 petition warrant articles included. One is right now listed as Article 7, which would essentially rescind the retained fund balance, and Article 8, which would change the voting requirement for any change to the co-op's articles of agreement to a 2/3 supermajority. So those are petition warrant articles. Kelly, will those have public hearings? They're not,
Article 7 does not require one, but Article 8 does, and the
Okay.
timing is such that we can have that at the same time as our regular public hearings.
okay, great, because in the past, we've had to do it in each
Right.
community and things like that.
No,
so-
we don't have to on this one.
Okay, so we'll
So are those warrant articles gonna have, the originators of those topics, are they gonna be coming to advocate for them, or?
They're certainly invited to go to the public hearing, but we never know whether they'll be there.
So they're
or not.
invited to provide input for 2 minutes, which is the input timeframe.
And that
We
will be
give
on
everyone-
February 19th?
On February
Correct.
19th.
Explain the, okay.
Will, so the way that the public hearing runs is I usually give kind of a quick overview, and then we read individually each article into the record, and one by one, we ask for input on any of them.
Do we know
And so-
what the motivation or the,
So I'm not
For these
even
things
going
there?
to look at intent or who, what, when, where, or how. All I know is we have Article 7 and Article 8, and if any person who submitted it wants to speak to it for 2 minutes at the public hearing, they can do that. There'll be no yielding of time or anything like that. You have 2 minutes, so.
okay.
Is that when this body will take positions?
Afterward, yes. So
Okay.
typically in the past, we've had both the board and the budget committee present and in
We do
session.
that.
Yes, I assume we are, yep.
Yeah.
I'll let the board know, but we'll have our regular monthly meeting on the 14th.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll follow that with our public hearing meeting on the 19th. And we'll do exactly what we did last year, where we'll take positions. And as board chair, I agree with you that anyone who wants to present on the petition warrant articles will have 2 minutes to speak to them. And anyone who wants to speak to them can speak to them
Right.
for 2 minutes. Yep. And that's the plan.
Yep.
And then we'll take positions on the warrant articles.
So what I did since that, Article 8 specifically referenced RSA 195-18-3I. I shared with everyone how that reads, just so that you had some information. In Article 7, it references RSA 198-4B2. And again, that one won't, anyone will have 2 minutes to speak to it. But I can share that with everyone, you can look it up, and that's just the straightforward language that speaks to, contingencies and the retained fund balance. So I just wanted to mention that those have been added to the warrant itself. We're still waiting on Brian. I would just say, Tom, I didn't share an updated budget view with everyone. Nothing's changed. We're still working from the last view. So we'll just dive into the CBA, if you
Yep.
don't mind.
I just thought I can give you the school board update.
Okay,
in
yeah,
advance,
great,
too.
let's do that.
Some of what we talked about was what we're going to talk about at the budget hearing as well, but a big part of what's going on right now is policy work. The legislation that has taken place and become active has required a tremendous amount of policy work, new policies and revisions to existing policies. I just want to remind people that this is an area where we lean very, very heavily on New Hampshire School Board Association, both in terms of just plain notifying us, but one of the real values of what they do is they draft templates for us to use for policy. And it's at no additional cost beyond our membership, whereas if we had to individually take each of these policies to paid attorneys to help us draft them and massage them to get them into form, that savings alone, I'm sure, far exceeds what we pay as an individual district as dues.
In the drafting process, I can see the value of doing that, but ultimately, do we have a legal review of the
They are
documents?
lawyers.
They're
Okay.
lawyers, they're
Okay.
attorneys.
Tom, the other thing I was going to mention, maybe you can kind of just explain, I don't know that we really ever talked about policy, really how your process works, but you do have a subcommittee of the board that is like a policy committee.
Yep, Holly's on that committee. I'm not sure who's chairing it right now.
Krista chairs it.
Krista chairs it. And the process is, we have things that come up that we identify internally as being needed, but then there's a list published at least annually, and if needed more frequently, by the New Hampshire School Board Association, alerting school boards to updates that have occurred and providing draft policies to consider. The normal process is to present it for first reading, get input if there is any, present it for a second, which usually reflects the edits, and then on third reading, if assuming that there's no ongoing objections, to adopt. In some of these cases, because of legal situations, we've been forced to try and do first and adopt, and that's a really, really difficult situation. But again, having templates that have been vetted by legal experts and people who are intimately familiar not only with the policy, but probably more critically, how it connects to all the other policies, taking it as a package. I think if we had to do that flying solo, we'd be stuck, really.
And we do, just so you know, we do read and review those, and if for some reason we question something that comes from New Hampshire School Board Association and don't feel like it fits with our community or our schools, we will, as a board or as a policy committee, then take it to our own attorney. We will. We don't hesitate to do that. It's just that a lot of these are very, I don't want to use, I guess, boiler, like the attorney from New Hampshire School Board Association has really created what we need. And they're meaty, and it's important to just follow through.
So that's been occupying a lot of time, budget, a lot of overlap here. But,
I assume you're gonna give examples of what we just talked about in your presentation?
no,
No, presentation's gonna be
This is
on
on-
the
this is just
collective
on the,
bargaining agreement.
School Board Association.
the professional staff contract.
Okay.
The minutes included, I did include Dawn had the draft minutes of the last school board meeting available, so I
Okay.
included them, and there's some information in there on the ones that were discussed and voted on.
So let me go
As
get
necessary.
plugged in and turned on.
Okay, that'd be great.
By the way, the template for this meeting that Dawn sent out, I really appreciate the fact that she helped define the categories of non-public, the definition of non-public types of discussions. Because I think that's an area where
It's not
I like the
always
idea of
clear.
being totally transparent to the public. And maybe, I don't know if that's something that is standard and that all the districts adopt.
Yeah. That way it's good.
I don't necessarily, well, yeah,
Best practices
Huh?
should be, best practices should be shared.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, that was very good.
That's today. Oh, not today. Is today the 23rd? No, it was primary day.
so just for reference, I did share with everyone the existing CBA, just so that as, Tom, Holly, were you on the negotiation team as well?
No, this is my first time.
Just as we walk through and maybe reference certain aspects of the contract, you had some familiarity, I seen that kind of flipping through it, but just to kind of, see some of the items as it reads and what's normally addressed and included.
Does the remote have a shrink?
Is that
Yep.
best you're gonna get.
Cool. Okay, we're looking at a contract that will start July 1st of this year, carry through 3 successive school years. These are some of the priorities that were stated by both groups entering into it. There's the overarching priority of meeting the needs of the students in the contract. What these were is the priorities of changes that were being promoted by the 2 organizations, the 2 parties to the negotiation. From the school board side, a very big one for us was to get increased interaction between the students and the teachers. Especially since COVID, we've had a situation where many of the programs and activities where there was close interaction of students and staff got dismantled. The need for social distancing, other type of cultural adaptations that have taken place seem to have brought a lack of the interaction, and it's presented itself in numerous ways, but perhaps a big part of it is the level of stress and anxiety that are being expressed by students, the number of times they go to nurses, things that are not being caught early enough to make it an easy fix. A student getting behind in their activities, a student having questions, communication issues. So we were really looking to improve that situation through some of the language of the contract. And that takes place in things, an example is that in current practice is that teachers do not supervise study halls. Study halls have been moved primarily into the cafeteria, and there are other people doing it other than staff. Another activity that has impacted that is the way that CAV block has evolved, because the way the contract is written, it distinguishes between you either do CAV block or you do study halls, but you don't do both. And we were looking to impact some of that. Are people here familiar with the term advisory as an activity in schools?
I would like to understand the difference between like advisory and CAV block.
Okay. Well, CAV block, when it was originally proposed and introduced, was defined in a way that in a large part encompassed the values of advisory. But the key element of advisory is that it is not a non-academic instructional period. It's not to say there is no discussion of things, but it's not a class. It's not where you're presenting new content to the students. But it also includes areas of interaction. And probably one of the key things is the grouping is not based on similar interests and similar courses and things like that. It's intentionally trying to create a heterogeneous group and provide a place where staff members can check in with the students, build relationships, to focus on, there's a buzzword going around now called one trusted adult, and to help identify an adult in the building that you can have a relationship with a student, and also to cultivate relationships among the students themselves in a context where we're not all together because we play the same sport. We're not all together simply because we play the same, we're in the same academic interest. These are groupings that, I won't call them random because they are going to be curated by administration and how kids are grouped, but the idea is to create an understanding of different viewpoints, a sharing, and to improve the the culture. This is something that sort of existed organically in many times, but not to the extent that advisory can foster it. It's an area that NEASC has for many years, more than 10 years, been promoting and asking that we do it. Cav Block was in part created to answer that, but Cav Block has evolved to be a primarily academic assistance program where there's 3 tiers of intervention and all this stuff, but the net effect is it never really took hold as this building of community and support environment.
So is advisory replacing CAV block? Because CAV block is
No.
like three times a week, and would
It-
advisory be the other 2, or?
No,
The-
it's,
No.
The
the,
go- yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
The goal was to create advisory. We have an instructional practices committee, subcommittee specifically on advisory that came up with a recommendation, but through, I think, my personal opinion is a lot of it is fear of the unknown. The contract was used as a mechanism to say that it couldn't be introduced. It was being grieved, there was a whole bunch of, it hadn't reached the point of grieving, but a grievance was threatened, a whole bunch of activities. There's a core group of staff that are extremely supportive of it and want it. There's another group of staff that have heard of it but have not experienced that are excited about it. There's another group who hear different stories of what it is and say, that's not a teacher's responsibility. It really isn't as foreign as some of the stories would try to make it. But what we want to do is get the language into the contract that would remove that barrier and let advisory be introduced in the appropriate way for our community. It's not a set curriculum, it is a concept and a way of behaving, for lack of a better word.
Is that gonna contribute to increased interaction between students and teachers? So that's part of the idea, right?
Significantly.
Yeah. It's also, can I just?
Yes, go ahead.
So what I think the administration has found since COVID is that kids have become more siloed, more focused on, I'm this kind of kid, I'm that kind of kid, I'm this kind of kid. It wasn't true 10 years ago as much, but they're just seeing it more. I don't know if it's because of the way social interactions have happened, I don't know why. So this will help. The consensus is, the thought is, the hope is that advisory will help break that down and help build a community. And when kids feel more connected to a community, and when kids have a trusted adult, things go better for kids, including academics. So that's the theory that they're going on. That's what the research is showing them. So.
Then, as I mentioned, teachers currently are not supervising study halls. And there are a number of students that have study halls for various reasons. Some because they want to have that avenue or that opportunity in the day to get work done. Some because their class schedules are such that they have all the classes that they can get through their schedule, and they don't want to take another class just to use up the time, so they take a study hall. For perhaps the majority of kids in study hall, that's okay. They're allowed to have their phones, they're allowed to do things. Sometimes it gets a little unruly and disruptive, but the bigger issue is there are some kids who really need a study hall for specific aids and support, and the people who are in there are not professionals at classroom management. They don't know the kids in the same way that the teaching staff does, and we want to change that. We want to change that situation. The other thing is, if the study halls move back to teacher supervised, they'll tend to be smaller groups because we don't know that all of them, but the majority of them will be in the classroom rather than in a large cafeteria. I don't know about you, but when I was in high school in Nashua High, almost all the study halls were in this cafeteria, and it was a zoo when you get that many kids in one room. Even with well-intentioned kids, it takes on a life of its own. So this was, again, another area to get touch points between the staff and the students. A big part of it was improving hiring competitiveness. You've just heard from Kelly that we get a great surplus because we don't have the staff, but there are some very negative repercussions, much of which is student outcome. But the other thing is, it's actually very costly when you have to use contracted services for activities. That's probably a bigger issue with some of the special ed activities. But in general, we have lost our competitive edge in the hiring area, and I'll talk to that a little bit more going forward. A final item that was on our agenda is staff honoring contracts. And we've talked about this in this meeting earlier, where in recent times we've had more than we've ever experienced in the past instances of people breaking their contract mid-year. And that's an unacceptable situation. It's caused by two things. It's caused by pay disparity, where people are leaving because they either feel they need to make more money or they have an offer that they can't refuse. It's also due to what teachers will phrase as working conditions, just some of the additional stress levels that come from the job. Things are interconnected because a big part of that expressed stress comes from the staffing issues, where teachers, they're supposed to be teaching 5 periods. There are many who are teaching 6 and sometimes 7 with no prep periods and no breaks because of vacancies. They don't want to say no because they know that the kids need the classes, but it just reaches a tipping point. So we wanted to do two things. One is to create an environment that's less likely to drive people to want to break a contract, but also to put language in that makes it very clear that it's not acceptable, and if possible, create repercussions. The union representatives, going along with this, it's the other sides of the same coins. Decreased stress and improved work-life balance. The kind of things that they proposed related to this involved additional time off, additional benefits, that both health benefits and other things of that nature. And they did come forward with some ideas that would help with, again, the student and staff interaction, because they as well understand the benefits to the overall program when that relationship is stronger. Problems get solved earlier. They were looking for pay equity with peer districts. Their definition of peer districts was a little different than ours. It somehow happened to align with some really, really well-paid districts. But we did have some overlap in where we benchmark and where they benchmark. They were looking for additional opportunities for leadership in the district, and I will point out some specific language, but it had to do with some creative things where they wanted to codify some things that are done on a case-by-case basis, but things such as developing and leading in-house professional development work themselves, where they may be experts or have passion areas for professional development for the staff that they would like to share, and they wanted to have formalization of those activities in the contract. And then, as I said before, additional leave. They gave us a fairly extensive laundry list of types of leave that they would be willing to accept. And we took that into consideration. So
Was that
here-
your language or their language?
What?
What you just said,
Which part?
that they will be willing to accept?
Well, the fact that they proposed them in black and white, that's my language of, my interpretation of their
I
action.
mean, I can understand paternity, because companies are beginning to do that.
Yep.
So that's consistent with other environments.
So this is some of the highlights of what we actually came out with our tentative agreement that I'm presenting to you tonight. We have a memorandum of understanding establishing advisory in the high school. We actually already have advisory in the middle school. It's called ROC, and it is functioning to a large degree as one would envision advisory could in the high school. The memorandum of understanding was created because it's a whole new program, and I'm not allowed to use that same bad cliche that it's like pornography. You can't define it, but you know what it is when you see it. People, when you talk about advisory, people have different definitions of it, but when you see a program described, it's clear whether this is advisory or it's a teaching activity. So it was not our goal to get an MOU. It was our goal to get language in the contract. This was viewed as a acceptable compromise because the way it's worded, it does not undo anything that we have. It creates a very clear framework without being overly restrictive. It was modeled on an MOU that was successfully implemented in another New Hampshire district, but tailored significantly for our use. We did get adjustments to assignment of duties, and that is primarily in the middle school, where the way that the language was creating some barriers. In the process of negotiation, we dug deeper into the existing contract and confirmed to ourselves and with the union that the current language does allow for the requirement of teachers to supervise studies. And we had sort of gotten caught up in the whole CAV block part of things and lost sight of what the language really allows. So although we didn't change the language, it was a productive process because we sort of went full circle. We went through these changes, and when we started comparing them to the language that what we wanted and what we have, we found that we really have what we want. We just need to utilize it properly.
I mean, the potential to be assigned to study hall is a specific thing in the
Yeah.
contract.
Right, but it would mean that you're not assigned a CAV block.
Yes,
But-
it says that as well.
But that's okay, because some teachers are not fully utilized in a CAV block, so they
Right.
would end up being in a study hall, and that's on the administration to make those decisions.
We have the tools now, which came about because of COVID, the adaptive scheduler, which makes it pretty clear where the kids are going during CAV block.
And why they're going there.
Yeah, and where they're not going. And in analyzing the data, it became pretty clear that there is a compromise that is in keeping with the language of the contract, that will allow the administration to get the coverage that they feel will improve the experience for the students. We deleted the rich health plan. There were two health plans. One was the driver plan and was used by the majority. The other plan, it was no cost to the district itself because we did not pay any more towards the more expensive health plan. Any additional premium was paid by the employee, but it was in there primarily to grandfather in some retirees who were eligible for health coverage through the way the system works, but lived in areas where the primary plan that we have didn't cover. Came down to, currently, we only had one staff member still on it, and the plan's going away. So we said, okay, we have to eliminate this. Can we just switch to just having the single plan? And the union talked with the employee that was involved and stuff. Long story short, the answer is yes. So we just deleted it. There's a single plan, no ambiguity about that now. We brought an explicit reference to policy GCQC, which is resignation of staff. And what the policy was created or started in 2003 and adopted in 2008, and it specifically says things such as you cannot break your contract, you cannot renege on it, and that the repercussions are that you can be held liable for damages. Now, in the real world, proving damages can be a difficult thing, but even the threat may be enough to curtail some movement that might otherwise occur. But the key thing that we've done is we have put language in the contract. I don't think most of the teachers ever read the policies unless it's put in front of them. I mean, most of us don't. So it puts language referencing the policy in the contract and highlights the fact that there are potential penalties for breaking the contract. And it also specifies that their annual contract that they sign every year will have an acknowledgement statement on that they, in signing their contract, will be signing that they have read and understood the policy, and they're going to be given a copy of the policy as part of their contract, that they have read and understood the policy and accept it. Not just that they agree to it, not just that they've read it, but that they agree to it. And
And they can be reported to the department.
yeah, and the other thing, the policy is if they break their contract, they will be reported to the state credentialing group about their breakage of contract. So,
If they were to break their contract, is there a minimum time required for them to give you so you
they
can at least?
can't break it during the contract period, plain and
Period.
simple.
I think we have to work a little bit on the policy, and they're actually willing to let us do some work on it, which was, because it's from 2008. It has a few like dates that need to be changed and some things, but there is a clause in there that, we can approve or accept like an extenuating circumstance, obviously, like
Yeah.
someone who has a health issue or, something extenuating, like, they have to move so
Right.
we can do that as a board, accept an actual legitimate reason, but this is,
And there are instances when we think that a parting of the ways is the best thing for everyone.
right, so we can accept, if we approve their resignation, it's, that this doesn't take place, it's when they come. Last year, we had, some resignations in the middle of the year that we actually voted no. We always approve resignation, and we voted no on them because that was all we could do. And we just were like, no, we're gonna vote no on these. So if we were to vote no on a resignation, that's what this could trigger.
Question.
Tony?
The contract's for 3 years. Is this an annual contract?
No, this is the collective bargaining agreement, and
Yeah.
then each teacher signs a contract in April for the next year only. That's the employment contract.
Okay, just want to be clear.
Yep.
Just one other thing.
Yep.
some experience, just a little experience in this area, where if you establish someone, a special situation, a special circumstance, that legal refrain from that because you have one special circumstance, then everyone's a special
Yeah.
circumstance.
Setting precedents.
Yeah, we'll be
Yes.
careful.
So everything that are exceptions should be in writing, so it becomes very clear if someone moves, there is an emergency situation, whatever it is, should be defined in categories.
I'll take that
Yeah,
under
good point.
advisement when we do the policy.
Yep.
Thank you.
We made adjustments to the professional development schedule, which worked for everybody involved, because part of the professional development up till now has been used for doing mandatory training that's required for certain things by the state. They require, it's the equivalent of health and safety training that you take when you work in manufacturing. It's things that all teachers have to be able to say that they got training this year on. We introduced in language which allows that to be done at the teacher's schedule, as long as it's complete. It can be done. It's done online, and it can be done before the start of school. So it gets recorded when they take it, and it shows up in their certification things. But the idea is so that we don't have to use up the valuable in-house time, those 2 days that we have at the beginning of every school year. And in return for that, we agreed to set aside specific chunks of time during those 2 days where the staff members can do their individual prep work and not be tied up in the big, larger audience type of training that sometimes goes on, or what I'll call the routine work that they're going to do ahead of time. So it ended up being a win-win. They got the time they wanted, and we continue to meet our needs and have a bigger chunk of time that can be used for functional training. The staff will be compensated for creating and providing in-district professional development using existing professional development allocations. This is what I was talking about wanting to do some self-directed and leadership type activities. And it is something that we do. The difference is, the way that it's worded now, in the past it's been stipended as an additional expense. There is an existing budgeted item for professional development for each staff member. It will now be paid out of that, so it actually will potentially cut costs, but it certainly won't add to costs. And it identifies how it's paid, so that it's not viewed as arbitrary or discretionary, and what is paid in the process. We increased the department chair stipend from 8% to 12%. The department chairs, in return for their activities, they teach one less class, although in the current situation it's not always true, but they're required to teach one less class. There is a lot more responsibilities on the chairs than there was 10 years ago. A lot of it has to do with the electronic activities that exist in the classroom now. The chairs do a lot of coordination, training, and mentoring for staff members on how to use those tools, some of the processes that are in place. There have been requirements introduced by the state as far as teacher supervision and recommendations and things of that, mentoring that have to be done. And this is pretty much just a recognition that they're doing more of a job. The percentage is tied to the step table at the lowest setting, which is bachelor's step 1. So this is a percentage of that amount. The 4% difference, it's 4% on about, so it's about it's about a $2,000 difference. There are 9 department chairs, so the total impact of that is in the neighborhood of 20 grand.
And only the high school has department chairs, not the middle
That's
school?
correct. The next one was a proposal that came to us from the membership, and that was a student loan repayment. And the idea there was when we're trying to hire, if there was a benefit of some possible repayment of student loans, that would be an attractive item to help encourage young teachers to join us. It establishes a fixed maximum amount, both overall and per year. The maximum amount that anyone can apply for is $1,000 a year. Has to be to an actual financial institution. A form was created, so it's not, my parents helped me out and I want to pay them back kind of thing. And it didn't even occur to me. And then, people brought some stuff up. So it's not I think it's a real,
It's $20,000.
yeah, the maximum is $20,000 in overall for the entire school year, for the entire staff.
Oh, for the
Just-
entire staff?
So
Pardon?
we would never give out more than $20,000. So if we have 40 people apply for it, they could only get $500 each. But if there's 20
So
people.
your budget is $20,000.
$20,000. So if
Yeah.
40 people apply, they can get 500. If 80 people apply, they can get 250. That's my
But
understanding
if
of
one
it, right?
person applies, they can only get
Yeah.
1,000
Right,
maximum. Personally, just knowing where people are in their careers when we hire them, I don't expect this to be a highly utilized one, but I do think from an optics standpoint, it demonstrates a willingness to help people at the hiring stage, and earlier, especially earlier in their careers. And then confirmation of paternity leave. The way that leave had been specified in the past, it's, you list that you can be out to help with the health of a family member, but paternity leave would have required getting superintendent approval. This clearly spells out that they'll be eligible for it in a manner similar to what has been introduced in industry and what's potentially coming down as federal law.
How many weeks?
It's 15 days.
no.
It's their sick days, isn't it? 15 days? It's
I don't
15 days.
recall.
I can
So
tell you
15 total days?
I can tell you,
I think it's 2 weeks.
I can
think
tell you
it's-
the exact
isn't it just-
language.
So, but paternity leave isn't part of like FMLA?
Well, let me
Separate.
read this to you.
Oh, maybe I could be wrong. Don't quote me. Let me read it.
A maximum of 15 days of accrued sick leave per year may be used to care for dependent members of the immediate family and/or for the staff member's required absence due to paternity leave, the placement of a child for adoption or foster care within 1 year of placement if qualified under FMLA. Additional days of accrued sick leave may be used for these purposes by authorization of the superintendent.
So it has nothing to do necessarily with, your wife just had a baby and you're gonna take, so many weeks off to assist her to be with her.
Well, the 15 days is the maximum, yes, that's what it is.
Exactly what it is.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In addition to all those other categories.
Well, there's 3 categories, because we didn't, and this was brought forth by the labor attorney. Adoption and, the new language is paternity leave, placement of child for adoption, or foster care.
Okay.
and it would have to qualify under family medical leave.
And those are 15 work days.
15 sick days.
Sick days.
So they have to have the sick days in their,
Bank.
in their sick bank.
Okay. Otherwise, they cannot use it.
Correct.
So there's a separate maternity leave benefit then?
Maternity is already covered under sick leave because it's you, because the patient is the person, you follow me?
All right,
The issue with paternity is, well, you didn't have the baby, so why do you need to be out?
That's the way it used to be, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Can leave be extended to the staff person without pay, if that was,
leave without pay is a separate issue, and it has to be applied for and approved independently because it creates a hardship to the school. And it's not just the expense, it's the inability to deliver the curriculum. So any unpaid leave needs to be requested and approved for any reason. Unless it comes under FMLA, there are protected reasons when someone can be out without pay, and there is no ability to limit that. But those are relatively clearly defined by federal law.
I think 15 days is very reasonable.
We do too.
There are places where there's a lot more.
Yeah, Scandinavian countries, they can take 9 months. So, moving right along.
All right.
We show you this graph to just bring attention to how we got to where we are. This is December 2019 through December 2023, and the blue line is the rolling 12-month inflation rate. It peaked in 2022 at over 9%. The orange line those were the COLA adjustments that the staff received in the contract that we are in. So we negotiated the last one at the early stages of COVID. And we approved it at the March meeting, which was a drive-through. That was a drive-through meeting, or was that the outdoor meeting? That was the
March
outdoor-
of
that was the out-
2021. Yeah, that was the outdoor meeting. The drive-through meeting was it was June of 2020.
So that was the outdoor meeting, and
April
Oh,
2021
outdoor meeting,
meeting was
that's
the
right.
9-hour meeting on the lacrosse field.
It's like a I
You don't
fondly
remember
remember
that?
that day as like the carnival. The only thing missing was the Ferris
and
wheel.
the step tables, just to quickly review them, have two components. There are the movement of steps based on every year progression. And on our current step tables, with only a few exceptions, the step is 2.5%. So when someone goes from year 1 to year 2, they get a 2.5% increase based solely on them being one more year of seniority. The COLA adjustment, the cost of living adjustment, is intended to reflect inflation, basically, but it has a double purpose. When you have reached the top step of your, I'll call it the bottom step because of the way the table is structured, the bottom step of your lane, and the lane is based on credentials, what degree you have, you stay there. And from that point forward, you only get increases based on the COLA adjustment. The COLA adjustment, so for our most senior staff, all they get is the COLA increase, they don't get the step increase. So for the first year of the contract they're in, the COLA adjustment was 0.75%, 0.75%. So if you were at the top, or the bottom step of your lane, you got a 0.75% increase. You can see here, that's when inflation was in the 5 to 8%. The next year, you got a 1.5%, and if you, even if you added to the step, you got effectively 4% that year for the staff. That's when it was peaking out at, 8, 9%. And then the year that we were in, coming into the year we're in, got 1.75%. So when we were negotiating this contract, we had been coming off of historically low rates. We didn't know what the economy was gonna hold. We didn't know where employment was gonna be. We weren't even sure whether we were gonna be able to continue to have in-person teaching like we were having. There was so many unknowns. Everyone was scared, and to be blunt, we offered very little and they accepted very little. And it was a good contract from the standpoint of keeping costs down. It was a bad contract from the standpoint of keeping us competitive, and we're paying the price right now. These low increases put us at a competitive disadvantage.
So can we just go back for 1 second? So on the orange line, I have 2 things to say. Would it be more accurate to represent the 1.5 and the 1.75 as cumulative to the 0.75? So the same way all of the CPI adjustments are cumulative?
They are not cumulative, they are points in time.
No, but 0.75 plus 1.5 would put you at 2.25%. And then 2.25 plus 1.75 would put you at 4.
But the blue doesn't do that.
It's not?
No, because that's not cumulative. Those are just points in time. So the 5.3 doesn't add to the 5.4 to make 10 point something.
So,
Those are just snapshots in time. I understand what you're saying, but these are just what.
so the entire
Actually-
thing, every blue line on the blue dot is a 12-month,
Rolling average.
okay.
I mean, to be more accurate, I would just have put little dots at those 2 points. I did this
Yep.
real quickly.
Yep.
I got the blue graph, and then I just wanted to put something on so that I would be able to talk to you. The only reason I put it as a line is to show where the years break.
Okay.
But we can talk about how best to present it if we want to use the slides at the meeting.
Well, because then, I understand that it's representing the COLA adjustment, but they are getting 2.5% on top of that.
Well, yeah.
Because everyone is effectively moved.
Well,
I think
that's-
there's a
that's what I
very,
wanna talk to
I
with
think
the-
there's a rare
Everybody's
instance
moving forward.
where people aren't moving up the step annually.
Actually,
Well,
it's
it's
the
not,
opposite.
it's just, it's getting to be the opposite, and I'm gonna cover that shortly.
Yeah, but it would be good to show that for those on the table, that what they get is,
Oh, right, and, yeah,
lot more
I know
now.
what you're saying,
Yeah.
because of,
We
because
have a
of the
higher
way.
percentage of people who are
I was
off the
just gonna say
table
that,
than on the
yes,
table, right?
yes.
Isn't
No,
it?
Yes.
it's about half, but I have that
Yes.
slide here.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
covering
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Okay to move on?
And that's important information, yes.
So this is some comparative points, and there's nothing overly significant about what they are, but the first set is Bachelor Step 1, which is our lowest pay rate, and that would be the hiring of a first-year teacher who only has their bachelor's degree. Master's Step 5, that's someone who has their master's degree and has been teaching in the New Hampshire system. Well, technically it's in our district, how we give credit depending on where they've been teaching, but for all intents and purposes, this is someone who is a 5-year veteran teacher with a master's degree. Master's Step 10, again, master's degree with 10 years of experience. And then max, that's different for different towns. For us, depends what degree you have, but ours goes up to 20 years. Some communities, it's only 15 years. What it doesn't show here is that other towns, many of them also have, on top of what I've shown here, longevity bonuses, and they vary significantly from several $100s to several $1,000s every year. It's not part of their base salary, but if you've been there 10 years or longer, you'll get a $2,500 adder. When you hit 15 years, you start getting a $3,500 adder.
And we never had longevity bonuses here on the co-op
No,
side?
we have longevity bonuses at retirement age as part of your retirement payoff, but not as part of an annual payment.
Right, okay.
So what, the black is,
So do you have versions of this chart for the benefits?
these, I can, but it was really difficult to decide what to put up because the addition of benefits, percentage-wise, when you look at do you use the benefits, the cost of the benefits and that they pay, or the cost of the benefits that they receive? So for instance, if someone's paying 20% and the district's paying 80%, do I add the 80% to this, or do I cut it by the take-home pay? My goal in showing this was not to show the cost to the district. My goal in showing this was to show the teacher's perspective from a competitive standpoint as to what they view to be their pay. And the easiest number for me to use was the salary table for it.
Yeah, but that's
If
just
you-
part
but-
of it, though.
But if you're gonna make an argument or at least compare benefits across the board, total benefits,
To the
including
staff,
salary,
to the staff,
to the staff,
we do worse.
yeah, but at least that would be more representative. I mean,
I ca- I-
every year we get where I work, I basically get a total package so that the company wants me to know that my total compensation is salary plus everything else.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, the short answer is yes, we can put that together.
Okay.
I picked this one.
Okay,
If I show that, the differences will amplify,
okay,
because compared to many of the districts, we pay a lower percentage of the health insurance than most other districts. And on top of that, because of the way that we work things here, our actual pay for our plans is lower as well. So if you add the compensation in, so a plan that might cost us $19,000, another district will paying $23,000 because it's double-edged sword. Because they pay a lower percentage of it, they use more of it. So their increases go higher. You know, one of the reasons that we've been pretty strict about not paying 100% of benefits is that even if it's a token amount, we want to make sure that the staff member is aware of the impact of each visit.
So we do pay currently 100% of a
For
single.
a single.
Right, 90% for two-person and
And
family.
85.
And for health?
Isn't it 90 and then 85 for a family?
No, I'm looking at 190.90, and then for dental, 195.90.
Yeah, okay,
Um,
yeah. The most
Because
of
we
the-
did away with the dollar cap several
Yeah,
contracts
A
ago.
lot of them that I looked at were in the 97%, 93%. I saw very few, there were a couple that were in the 80s, but most of them, they were paying 90%, in the mid-90%.
What criteria was used to come up with that list of comparable school districts?
That I had the data.
Yep.
That was a big part of it. These are, Amherst, these are schools that we have lost staff to, or that are nearby.
Right, Exeter is a co-op.
Yeah, Exeter, yeah, we pick Exeter because it's one of the larger co-ops. Amherst and Bedford,
Close.
we actually compete with them on a regular basis for hiring. Concord, we've been losing staff to recently because we have a fair number of staff members who live in the sort of Bedford, Bedford, Manchester area, so Concord turns out to be a competitive district with us. The others that I had data for, I thought were less appropriate, Hanover, which is often shown because they pay a ton, Oyster River pays a ton.
Yeah.
But we don't really compete with them too much.
Yeah.
Right, and Hollis and Brookline are in the SAU,
Yeah.
but don't necessarily compete for our staff
Right,
because
and-
of credentialing.
And that's why I put them at the end with
Yeah.
shades, but because they're in the SAU,
Yeah.
they never fail to show us when we're paying less than
Yep.
the elementary districts.
Yeah.
Which is now? Which
Yeah.
is now?
For Hollis, but
Not at the
not
hiring
Brookline.
level. Now, the thing I want to point out to you is that we're really not in a bad shape if we were hiring entry level. But particularly in the co-op, when you look at the subject matter and the requirements, we don't have a really strong environment for training a real novice teacher. For instance, Merrimack, their board chairs, they only teach one class.
Department chairs, yeah.
Department chairs, they only teach one class. So a large part of their responsibilities is overseeing new hires and developing things like that. Our placeholder used to be Master Step 5. I think we're using Master Step 7 now. So we try to hire people that have some level of experience. There's two benefits to it. One is they have classroom management skills. The other is they have a history that's a lot easier to check on. It's less speculative. Certain subjects, it's particularly important. We're looking often for certifications that are very rare to come out of school, especially if you've got some of the math and science certifications or AP certifications. So it's hard to get that at the bachelor's level. The mid-master's level is where we do most of our hiring when we can. This past year, we've hired much more on the senior side of that. The max level is important because these are our senior teachers. These are the teachers who are, for the most part, 15 to 20 years or more in the job. And they're looking at the differences. It's hard, they have less mobility because they're sort of being trained, but they're being more heavily recruited as well because of their experience, especially anyone who's got AP certification and experience in some of the higher level maths and sciences. Those are being recruited very heavily. People have special certifications, but any of the APs, whether it be in the social studies, languages, or STEM fields, they are fairly heavily recruited. We lost one of our well-certified teachers to Concord, and they got a $20,000 bump in pay, just a lateral move, just to teaching in another district. So,
Quick question on the legend. HB is Hollis Brookline, right?
correct.
And so you're comparing Hollis Brookline with the Hollis School District
That's
and
the-
Brookline School District?
Yeah.
Even though they're not necessarily,
I just put them on,
Okay.
that's why I put them at the end, and that's why they have that sort of dotted kind of thing.
Okay.
But
Yeah, all
also in other districts, they're K-12 districts, so your elementary and
Yes.
your middle and high school teachers are all in the same pool.
Right. Right. So, let's see. Now, this shows the mix of staff members that we currently have. The bright yellow are people who are on the top step this year, meaning next year, they will only get the COLA. There's 41% of the staff this year. It was more last year, but we did have some exits. Next year, going from 25 to 26, you see those 3 blocks of 2 in the pale yellow. Those then, next year will be at the top step. So the following year, if we have no staffing changes, 46% of our staff will be on the top step. And you can see the master's column, we've got a lot there, we've got a lot with masters plus 30. Masters plus 30 catches everything, even our staff members who have doctorates, that's where they go. That's another way that some districts, some have masters plus 45, some have PhD, things like that. We keep it pretty focused.
It would be interesting to see a chart that shows the history of your total staff membership and the number of total students over the years. Because I recall, this number seems low compared to what I've seen in the past, right?
Pre-COVID, we were over 50%.
From that number.
As far as,
You mean over 50% on the top staff?
yeah.
Is
And
that
then,
Yeah, but I'm talking about the
Actual
total
number
number,
of
the
teachers.
114. I think
Oh,
I
the
remember
total.
numbers as many as like 140 at one point, or,
no.
no?
Not for just professional staff.
I don't think we've ever hit 120, but we do have that data.
Okay.
The peak was probably 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, when we had peak enrollment and all the teachers on carts. But we don't have room for many more teachers, we have physical space.
Okay.
So this is the numbers. The first year of the tentative agreement is a 10% increase to the step table, which will result in approximately 13% average increase for people who are moving up, 10% for the people at top. So 41% will get a 10%, the rest will get approximately a 13%. The top step, just before the top step, there's some that are 9 to 11 because we didn't have exactly 2.5% in the steps there, and we normalized it, so they got bumped down a little bit from others, but that is the average. So the salary increase is 10.9%, and the reason it's more than the 10% is some of it's on steps, but the reason it's not bigger than that is that we have so many people right on the top step. And the total increase, including Social Security and New Hampshire retirement, is the 1.140 at 10.93%.
What about the additional pieces for the department chair change and the student loan repayment?
this
That's
is-
in addition to this?
Yeah, this is just the step table, this is just the salary and those specific benefits. It does not include health, that doesn't include health insurance either.
Did we, okay.
We didn't make
We
any
didn't change any
changes,
percentages
so-
with
Pardon
that.
me?
We didn't make any changes to help.
No, but I mean, it doesn't include the compensation to it.
Well, that's in the
Oh, yeah,
regular
okay, yeah,
budget.
this,
That
yeah,
would-
it's not,
insurance
it's not a,
would go-
it's not a
insurance
change.
goes in the
Never
regular
mind.
budget.
So this, yeah, this is the increase in FICA and New Hampshire RS directly due to the increase in salary. So the budget for the existing portion of salary does, all that stays as budgeted.
Yeah.
Second year, we revert back to more of a CPI-based number, 3% to the step table, and year 3 is 2.5%.
I know this is very rough calculation, but if you take the 2.118 million, divided by 114 professional staff, divided by 3 years, it comes to roughly 6.2K per year per person. Is that a reasonable number? I don't know. And that
That's-
includes FICA, retirement.
That's low for the people up top. They're gonna get more than that, and, you know, it's an average, but it doesn't apply to anyone.
I know, but it's very, but at the district meetings, when we're gonna
Yeah.
have discussions with the public, we need to
How
understand
we
what
want
those.
to present it, and that can be a point of discussion.
Yeah,
And just for context, there have been 3 recent tentative agreements publicized in the area. Litchfield has a 2-year contract with, they're going for a warrant of 1.26 million for 2 years. Pelham's 3-year at 2.26 million.
In the first year.
No, I think
In
that-
total.
I think that's only the first year?
No, I don't know, that's what I'm asking.
No, that's over the
That's
3-year
the total,
contract.
yeah.
Total cost of the contract.
That
Okay.
compares to our
2.1.
2.1, and Milford is 3.74 over the 4.
Yeah,
so
the
do we
fee
know how
that's-
many professional staff they have in their
You-
staff?
Milford
Sorry.
is similar to us. I think Pelham, they said is, Andy told me was 40.
I'm not sure.
I think he said there's 40 staff members in Pelham.
That's it?
Yeah, and I don't know what Litchfield is.
So
It
the
was either that or
percent, the
reverse
percent, to show the percent for what each of those are would kind of put that more in context, because just seeing numbers like that is like for Milford, the 3.74, is that a 5% jump or is it a 30% jump? So that,
I don't have the whole thing. I know that they went 8%, then there's something really weird going on because Milford had a contract that was very rich. They grandfathered that for staff, but then created a whole new salary plan for new staff. They did this, I think, about 3 years ago.
1 or 2 contracts ago, yeah.
And they've had a huge attrition. I've heard numbers of double-digit losses.
Yeah, we have a lot of them.
I think over the course of since that change, they've lost 25% of their staff. And what they did for this new one is they're moving everyone back to the old grandfathered plan and then bumping that plan. So
And
they're,
that was it, that's it.
they're bumping that plan, I think it's 8% this year. I watched the presentation it's on video. They're bumping that up, so some staff members are getting the 8%, but the ones who were hired in the last few years that are lower are getting a much higher percent, but they don't tell you what it is. And then it's a smaller percent in year 2, and then it's a large percent in year 3, and a smaller percent in year 4. I don't know the logic behind it or how it maps out. Their total budget is in the $40 million range. It's in the 40s.
Help me to understand what this is saying here, because I'm having a very difficult time putting this into any sort of context.
Okay.
So let's just take the first one,
Yeah.
for example. Year 1, 10% to table. What does
Increasing the
that mean?
Increasing the step table by 10%.
It means that at
Okay.
every level,
Yep,
whether you're a first year or a 5th year with a master's or whatever, the pay scale for that is increasing by 10%. So if this
That's
year,
significant.
someone is making
Yeah.
$50,000 a year,
yep,
that same position next year will be 55,000.
plus they're getting the step up
Well,
beyond that as
I'm
well.
saying same thing. Now, for an employee,
Yep,
they are going to get 2.5% by moving a step, so they'll go from 50,000 to 50.
yeah, let's call it 51, it's not right, but still,
And
yeah.
then add 10% to that, so they will be getting.
Basically a 12.5%, right?
That's what it says,
well,
13%.
Most will be
13%.
approximately 13%. It's like 12.79%.
I see. So with the steps, it's roughly 13% increase in the first year,
Correct.
and then about a 5.6% increase the next year, and a
If-
5.1%
if you're in the
increase.
table.
If you're on the table.
But then if you're
which
not on
a
the
little-
table, right.
Yeah, so a little over half of the employees are on the table. They would get 13, 5.5, or 5.6 and 5.1 roughly, you
Yes.
know.
That's
And if you're already maxed out, which is about 45%, they get a 10% raise followed by a 3% raise followed by a 2.5% raise. That's what
That's
that's
correct.
saying.
Right.
And I'm going back to how it was, the kind of language that was used when I was working in big corporation. Now I work in small corporation, but I worked for digital for a number of years, and every 6 to 8 years, they would hire a group to come in, and they would survey they'd go through all the salaries, and they look at industry, and they would do an adjustment. And I was only there for 10 years, so I only got one of them, but they came in and they said, okay, based on competitive analysis, this is where this position should get paid. The 10%, a big part of that is to deal with this. And that's to get us,
So we're comparing ourselves to the school districts that are paying more, that we're losing some too. But at the same time, you're also saying that we're getting a lot of teachers from the other school districts that aren't paying so much. To me, that sounds like we're kind of in the middle. We're gaining some, we're losing a few.
we're not getting them now, we got them in the past.
All right?
It's getting harder and harder. I mean, that's point blank, that's what we were told
Yep.
in the room by our administration,
Yep.
is that it's getting harder and harder
Yep.
to get the candidates that they want
Yep.
to come through the doors. And that HB has always been a place where people wanted to come to. And it's getting harder and harder to be that.
Yep.
And fundamentally, at the core, to be a high-quality school system, you need highly qualified individuals
Yep.
to teach.
Yep.
And the pool of teachers is shrinking. It's shrinking. The education programs are shrinking, kids aren't going into it. So it's becoming a more competitive environment, and it's shrinking. So yes, maybe some people are coming from Milford, but we're losing to others, and the pool is smaller, and it's just getting tighter and harder.
All right, thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I did just out of my own curiosity is the Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes so much data that it boggles the mind, but I was trying to sift through for different professions in our region and trying to say, okay, where does pay like what we're paying compared to someone with similar credentials in other areas? And that was just for my curiosity. If you look at professions that generally require some level of post-secondary education, I looked at things like nursing, I looked at engineering, I looked at finance, places where we're actually losing teachers to engineering and finance, where we have specific losses that are quite common in those areas. And then if I took, say, a teacher basically gets an extra extra month of vacation relative to those professions, because those professions generally get 4 weeks, and ours get about 8 weeks. These are the kind of pay scales that this is the proposed next year pay. So it maxes out for someone who's got their master's degree and at least 30 credit hours towards additional degrees. The maximum they can make is a little shy of 100 grand. Starting salary, you can see sort of across the board, is in the 50s. It's very unusual to have a first-year teacher who is highly credentialed unless they're coming to us from industry. So we're trying to get into the area where we're paying competitive with other New Hampshire districts. We're not even making any attempt to try and be competitive with Massachusetts. For a starting teacher, it's a big deal. My daughter-in-law is a teacher, and she's in her first few years, and she had the choice of starting work in New Hampshire or starting in Massachusetts, and she started in Massachusetts, and after once she has, I think it's either 3 or 4 years, some of the credentialing has reciprocity. The big issue is, once you get into a teacher who has been in the system for close to 10 years and they have vested in their retirement system, it's hard to get them to move to another retirement system where they're no longer vested right away. So, it's hard to play this against Massachusetts, so we don't even try. But we do know the pay scales are much higher there. But we think there's other benefits to working in New Hampshire.
Are there any other financial aspects to the contract that we haven't talked about? So we have the
Yeah.
department chair, there's more? There's more. Great.
Are we almost to the end, or?
Yes,
Okay.
this will be, the proposed contract is San-Bernized, and we had the discussion. The question was, what are the benefits of doing it? Why should we do it if there's no benefits? The benefits are, from my point of view, as you see here, first of all, it allows us to get a contract. This was a very important characteristic for our staff. The benefits to us, which are real, is reduced budgeting complexity. It allows us to, for years 2 and 3, make that budgeting activity clear, black and white, and much more well-defined. There are reduced legal costs, both in terms of preparation of warrant articles and things like that, but more importantly, if we have to open up negotiations. Negotiations are pretty costly. We use tens of hours of legal time, if not 100 plus, depends. With HOPE, it shortens the annual meeting in years 2 and 3. We have 2 petition warrant articles so far. We expect to get probably 4 or 5 more. Just based on what's already happened in Brookline. And to add the presentation, discussion, and voting of another professional staff contract every year, which is what you have to do if it's not San-Bernized, is not desirable. And the big thing is the increased transparency regarding the structure and the cost of the contract. This is both a good thing and a bad thing. We will, on the warrant article, talk about the cost of all 3 years. When you don't San-Bernize it, the warrant article is for the first year only. This shows what the full commitment is, and it shows what the full commitment is. And I will state right out here, right now, we advised the teachers that we thought it was a bad move, because the difference between looking at a warrant article for 1.1 million and a warrant article for 2.1 million, to me, has a big emotional difference, emotional impact. I'd rather be trying to say 1.1 if I want the thing to pass.
Was there any discussion of splitting that 10 to something more like 6 and 7 in the second year or something like that?
The short answer is no, because the discussion came down to this, not up to.
And this was negotiated, we didn't go to like mediation or anything like that?
Negotiated.
And the only other financial elements are the increase for the department chair and the student loan repayment? There's no other financial piece
I
that,
wouldn't include the student loan payment, because we don't know if, one person might take advantage of that, so.
That's only 20K, I mean,
okay.
right?
Right.
But you're gonna add the 20K with FICA and NHRS for the department heads.
We're gonna add the money for the stipends, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything else, Darlene, to answer your question.
Okay.
There's no other financial
I
things.
don't recall that there were any that we can actually, a
No,
tangible
because
cost.
even the professional development thing comes out of the PD funds, right?
It does,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
It's already in the budget.
Yeah, that's already in the budget,
Right,
so.
right.
What is the implication if this were to fail,
If it were to fail,
just for the public record?
No, it's fine.
To put it in
It's
the
fine.
minutes.
It's a
my
good question.
understanding is that they would potentially continue without a contract, and that it would continue under the terms of the existing contract for both working conditions and pay. They would get no increase, but none of the things that we have negotiated for changing in language to allow certain activities would be possible, and the memorandum of understanding for the advisory would not be put into effect.
So are you considering, in the past, we've had like a contingent article, that if it were to fail, you'd allow,
We
like have a
haven't
special
discussed
meeting
it.
to renegotiate?
We haven't discussed it in the past. There has not been an appetite for that. It's interesting, I watched the Milford hearing, and they had proposed it, and they voted down, including, they retracted those. Part of it is, again, it's a very laborious process. And I'm not sure that would gain you much. You still have to go into negotiation a few months later.
And just to clarify, that's just, those three examples, those are just tentative agreements. Those towns have not approved and voted,
No,
and
they
That
haven't been
is-
approved yet.
so those,
That
all
is
three
correct.
could easily be voted down.
They could.
Yeah.
I think it's just show though that
Yeah.
we're not, this isn't a vacuum. We're not in a vacuum here. I mean, this is happening across the state, in many different districts. People are experiencing the same thing, want to be on the competitive edge, need to hire. A lot of teachers are feeling that, so.
Yeah, again, I'll just go back to this. If you look at the 10% increase, this is current year, this is not next year.
Yeah.
So if you bump us by 10% and they stay stagnant, we're still lower.
But
Not necessarily. No, not necessarily.
But we're definitely, we're kind of intentionally comparing ourselves to the most competitive school districts
No,
in
we're
the
no,
state.
not even close.
Not even close.
If,
Oyster River and
No,
Hanover.
they're competitive
okay,
from
you're
the.
granted,
No,
granted,
no,
you're
not even
completely right
price-wise.
on that.
No,
Right.
I'm
But,
not- we're comparing us because these are what we feel most similar. If you look at big cities like Nashua, Manchester, any of those, they pay much more. But it's not a comparable working environment.
that's a fair point.
We feel that these are
have a different
co-
tax base, too.
comparable in terms of similarity, not similarity of pay.
But,
And Nashua
Yep.
is right next door, and they
Yep.
do pay more. It is a different experience, and so, but at some point, when you're interviewing for a job, that, at some point, you're gonna say, okay, it might be harder over there, and it might not be what I want, but if it's that much more, I mean,
Yeah.
they have to pay taxes too.
Yeah.
And they have to pay for fuel oil too, and they have to pay for the inflation too.
yeah,
Yeah, I
all
think
fair,
we're
all
more-
fair
I
points.
think we're more likely to compete with them at the elementary school level than at the middle school and high school, because in middle school and high school, we tend to be hiring more seasoned teachers who understand the value of getting into a district like ours and are willing to forego the absolute pay for the work experience and the work satisfaction. So we think they're intangibles, and that's why we're not looking to go to the top of the list. But we also have to get them in the door.
Yeah.
Tony?
Have we ever looked at comparing Hollis to other schools that are ranked with us, like Hanover and,
Oh, yeah.
you know, I guess it's this, you know, the Academy of Arts and Science in Nashua is, I think, ranked number 2. and we're
We
ranked
don't
number 3.
compare it to charter schools, but we do look at ones that are similarly ranked in the state, and that's typically Hanover, Oyster River, a couple of others. We pay a lot less, a lot lower than they do, but they have a completely different tax base than we do.
Can you say that?
Hanover is probably the highest paying. They have pay scales that go up to like $135,000. Their superintendent makes over $200,000 a year. Oyster River has a lot of the UNH community and Dover and stuff. They also pay really well. And then the big cities pay a lot because, I don't mean to be facetious, but it's almost like combat pay. How's the situation in Salem
I'm sorry, and what?
from pay compared to us?
They are higher than this
Okay,
table,
yeah. The
by about 5%.
yeah, the bigger, some of the communities that have a.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the current FY '24
Yeah,
step table.
I'm just thinking, you know, community, from a standpoint of cost per pupil, we still remain well positioned. The co-op does really well. Middle school has had an anomaly because of a small cohort going through it, which changed the calculation. But in general, on a cost per pupil basis, we do real well. But unfortunately, it's almost all borne by residential tax revenue as opposed to, you know, a place like
Commercial.
Bedford, Amherst as well. Amherst has Route 101A. They've got a commercial tax base, so even though they pay more, their residents
feel it.
pay less.
Question?
Yes.
Have we taken into account this input to do the final estimated taxation?
She's
No,
seeing it for
not
the first
yet,
time.
because this is the first time I'm seeing it.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know.
This was
Oh,
just ratified this week, so you people, other than in non-public, you are the first people seeing this information.
It will be incorporated, but.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because I remember you have done some estimates over the years to come up with roughly a 3% net increase per year, right? Over years.
Yeah, we're gonna blow it out in the
And
water.
this number's gonna be,
Oh, yeah.
maybe significantly higher this year.
Yeah. So,
We appreciate that, we know that.
And
Well,
Well,
in my
it's-
mind, we gotta strike the right balance between staying near the top of all, or at the top of at the state level with the cost and value, you know what I mean? I mean, this is not an easy,
It isn't an easy thing.
an easy situation here.
So for me, this is what Tom said, it's about adjusting for two things. Staying competitive and adjusting for the fact that we didn't quite keep up with inflation during those 3 years. So it's like two types of adjustment. It's adjusting for that, the contract that didn't keep up with inflation, and adjusting for the fact that we have to keep up with what's going on in terms of the competitive nature of a shrinking teaching pool. So there's two pieces. And then finally, I think there's a little bit of me that feels like our teachers did something that not many, although some, but not many districts did back in 2020, 2021.
Right.
And they came in and they roomed and zoomed, and I think the public needs to understand what that means. When our teachers came in 2020 to 21, they taught in the room and they taught on Zoom, which means that they took on an extra workload. They basically taught every class that they went into, they had to teach the kids in the room and they had to prepare to teach the kids on Zoom. So that was double teaching. They doubled their workload. They didn't have to do that. They agreed to a sidebar. They then went into a contract that had those small increases. There's a little bit of recognition that they deserve for that. I mean, maybe you don't think that, I feel like they do. That's the kind of staff we have. Like, they agreed to do that. Not every staff across the state did that. That's how our kids got to be in school full-time, Monday through Friday, every day, full-time. A lot of kids across the state didn't. Across the country didn't. And when our kids graduated in 2021, you talk to the graduates from 2021, they walked into college classrooms with kids who had not been in a classroom in a year. Many, many kids did not see the inside of a classroom for a year. And our kids in Hollis Brookline were in classes, they were in extracurriculars, they were in sports, they were in activities, they were doing everything because of the staff in the co-op. The teachers were willing to do that. We have an incredible staff, and we want to keep getting those kinds of incredible people. And our administrators are telling us, those people who hire, that it's getting harder and harder and harder to keep them. We're losing people, we're losing good people, and to keep bringing new people in, that's what we're hearing. So we're adjusting, and that's what this is. So Darlene, you're right, 6%, 7%, that would have been, but either way you cut it.
It's still a lot.
It's still gonna be a lot.
Even splitting
It's still gonna be a lot. It's
It's
still gonna be the total. And this gives you like, this is what you do. It's an adjustment. And then we go back down to 3%, 2.5%.
And I just wanted to say, I think if you take, ignoring the monetary compensation part of it, we like the contract. We like the contract we had, we like the new contract better. We think in terms of what it does for getting the kids in what they need, we like it very much. In terms of the pay, they actually came to us with a different proposal, which was structured differently, and we restructured it because the one that they had put a lot more of the money into the middle years. The cost was almost identical, but we wanted to recognize that we thrive because of our senior staff, and we wanted them to get fair compensation to keep them there. Is this going to make us one of the top paying districts even among our peer group? No, but it's not, we're hopeful, because we don't know what they're going to do this year, some of them. We're hopeful that it will keep us at the point where money alone is not the deciding factor.
Could we go to the next page, which I believe has the, couple more down than that one. Yes, great, has the percentages on it. Looking at this municipally, at the town of Brookline, going away from the school districts for a moment, because we set our increases, on a yearly basis. So we've been able for the last couple of years to provide some very generous increases. Last year, we provided a 7% across the board increase for it. So given that we're really kind of shackled by a 3-year contract in which the teachers are not being paid, kept it up with inflation, because of the nature of that, we don't have the flexibility of being able to manage this year by year. But for whatever reason, I do expect a significant increase in this first year to make up for the past couple of years. Given balancing those things out, the numbers that we're seeing there for people who are at the top of the table are kind of the numbers I was expecting to see coming into this, like a 10% the first year, something in the 3% the following years to make up for that. So what we're really talking, in my mind, what we're really talking about, the difference between that being off the table and on step table, is the difference that we're trying to apply towards being more competitive. That's just, maybe that's not an accurate way of looking at it. That's kind of the way I'm seeing it, because I can kind of see those top of the line numbers as being kind of the base of just
I think
making up for inflation.
I think it's a fair
And
assessment,
but 13%, 5.6%, 5.1%, those are some hefty numbers right there. But,
Yeah, they're not unusual.
but it's kind of amounts to like a 3%, a 3% and a 3% for 3 years to apply to the competitive factor. Aside from the inflation factor, it adds up a lot. But I don't know,
One
the
thing
more
we-
I stare at it, the more it starts to make a bit more sense to me, but boy, those are
Well,
some
no,
scary
it's
numbers.
a big gulp.
no,
It's a big gulp. We're not saying it isn't.
Yeah,
I think the last contract that was passed added up to a little over
Yeah.
$1 million.
Yeah.
We're aware.
Yeah, no, we've been looking very closely. The other thing we don't know, and I'm not trying to downplay the impact of this, is we have no clue what's gonna happen on the revenue side.
mm-hmm,
You know, doing the lawsuits and whether that, anything will get resolved or anything. As with anything else. and
What
our-
lawsuit?
what lawsuit?
Um,
It's about the one for
oh, that,
competitive
yeah, that the,
cost.
Oh, you mean the adequacy aid? That?
yeah.
Right.
Oh,
I
okay,
was like,
gotcha.
I was like,
All right,
gosh,
that's-
what lawsuit?
Okay, now what?
What
No,
does
no,
that
no.
even mean?
Okay,
the
yeah,
fact
we're with you
mean the
now.
state- The lawsuit at the
Yeah.
state level, okay.
Yeah, oh, no.
Yes,
thank
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we were all kind of like,
Like,
oh.
oh,
No,
So-
I think we're just
Yeah.
moving, we have
Yeah.
estimates right now from
Okay.
the state on adequacies, the same estimates like we
Are
get
they allowed
every
to
year.
pay that?
I'm sorry?
Are they allowed to pay that? Or did
Yeah,
I didn't know if the court ruling blocked that.
no,
Okay.
no. So until all of that gets resolved, we're just moving with the status quo
Right.
of what we've been
Right.
told. And, you know, if legislation, you know, there's also legislation right now that would, you know, increase amounts as well. That could pass also, you know, so
But
there
it
are
might not
always
help
those
us either.
things.
Like
I'm
it-
sorry?
The legislation could pass, but it doesn't necessarily help Hollis Brookline, right?
That's true.
Right.
There are lots of,
Depends what they base it on.
there are lots of, you know, puts and the changes to the adequacy formula that were instituted and that they're basing aid on, there are many components to them. And what we found in looking at it for the co-op is that because of the shift in students and things like that, there were other factors, like we didn't see the gains that other districts
Right,
saw.
right.
Because of just how
Right.
things kind of flow,
Yep.
Right.
you know, back and forth between the two schools,
So-
the two towns, so. But we're just moving forward with the same information we've always been given.
I will tell you that some thanks goes to both our negotiating team, but especially the staff. We had 2 4-hour negotiation sessions since the new year, and 2 more sessions since then as they worked, including one on the snow day, as they worked with us to try and reach this agreement in time for this meeting. So, we take it very seriously, and we don't always succeed, but they worked with us to get to this point for you. They just voted on it 2 days ago.
And I appreciate the time you took tonight, Tom. I think this is the most comprehensive contract overview we've seen,
In
period.
a long time.
Period. And so I sincerely appreciate that. I think there's a lot of thinking and subsequent calculating that various budget committee members will do. What I'll do is, I've kind of calculated the step tables, but I'll verify those with Kelly.
I have a spreadsheet
You have the whole
that we
spreadsheet,
can
right?
share that it breaks it down by percentage, by dollar amount increase, all the different
Yeah.
ways you'd wanna break that out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll probably work with Kelly to figure out which is there's so much information there.
There is a lot of
We
information.
also have a whole bunch on competitive districts. What happens is Kelly meets with her team over the summer, and I'm not sure who's involved with that, you could probably elaborate, but she came back with a spreadsheet. And there were some other communities, their pay scale is just so difficult to comprehend that it's hard to compare it. So for instance, they may only have 5 steps, but then they've got text that talks about all the different conditions on how you get more money. And I left them out just because I didn't know what to do with them. But,
Well, I know, and Matt's been here pulling up,
Yeah, they have
step
the
tables and things like that,
Nashua
so,
table up.
so maybe you can, we'll kind of come up with, look at some of those and forward them on to budget committee members and things like
Great.
that. And just to digest the information, because the public hearing is in a month where we will take a position
Yep.
as a committee. So,
Good.
we're running long, we still have a couple things to cover.
I had
but-
just one more question, if you
Yeah,
don't
no,
mind.
I was gonna say,
So it's,
last round, and then if
Listen,
anyone
go ahead.
has anything after, please forward me any questions, and we'll make sure that they get sent back to Tom and Kelly. Well, Tom will see, we'll see them, and we'll get some more information.
okay, so apologies for being late. Had another meeting run over. But getting back to the advisory, advisory, that was the right word for it, that you were discussing earlier when I
wanna see
when I
the
walked in.
MOU?
So, yes,
have
my question is, why does, that seems like a kind of a school policy type of things. Why would something like that need to be in the contract?
because my opinion is that it doesn't. But the union position is that it is a working responsibility that is not otherwise covered by the categories of responsibilities in the existing, such as teaching and tutoring and
Duties.
lunch duty.
Alright.
And then they say it's a whole new category of activity, and therefore, rather than continue to fight it,
Mhm.
what we want to do is get language in that acknowledge the administrative prerogative to introduce.
Okay, all right, good, thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay. So as I said, if other questions come up, please forward them to me. We'll get those answered, and we'll get some additional information out to everybody.
I know we're running long, but do you want to see the MOU? I have it right here if you want to see it.
I
If the
think,
answer's no, then that's fine with
I
me.
think if we can share it after the meeting,
Okay.
that would be great.
Or if you could email it.
Yeah, we'll,
have to go, so.
email.
Yep.
Okay, I just
We
wanna-
always need you.
Thank you,
Thank
Holly,
you,
for
thanks,
coming.
Thank
Holly.
you.
So the two things that are remaining, I don't expect, I mean, we
Have a
are
good
running
night.
long, and I know people, have plans, we work hard to, I appreciate the time, and I'm not, I think it was time extremely well spent to understand a contract of this magnitude. But I don't know that people have an appetite to walk through an entire public hearing deck, at this point, so I'll leave that to the committee. Right, I do have one or two other things I need to add. But the public hearing deck itself is a pretty standard presentation that I've provided and done for several years. I would ask, if we aren't gonna go through it, if you do have any recommendations of things you think should be added or removed, please just let me know. Because sometimes it takes a little bit of time to come up with the trend and the time, the years of data. Kelly's already provided me with some, information that I requested, but to come up with 10 years of data sometimes takes a little bit of effort going through old files and things like that, depending on what the request is. One of the things we've talked about in the past is some acknowledgement of the unreserved fund balance and what those levels have looked like and trended like over the years. And I think there might be a way for me to kind of adapt that into the public hearing, and if not the public hearing, then something at annual meeting. So I'll look at that. We might have, as Tom mentioned, additional petition articles that get added, because the window for that is, the closing date for those
February
articles.
6th,
Is that right, the
think
6th?
Yeah, I don't
Oh,
remember.
it's early in February.
Yes,
So if everybody is okay with providing that type of feedback to me about the public hearing deck, I'll take that and get a draft to everyone prior to the meeting on the 19th. I'm working on it now. And it will include some information on estimated tax impacts and things like that. The other thing I wanted to mention,
In case somebody wants it.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
the other thing I wanted to mention is something Tony and I have been discussing, and one's for you, one's for Kelly, because Tony already has this.
thank you.
so we already, Tony and I already talked about some changes to formats and things like that, but what this is basically an Excel spreadsheet that looks at the trend of people's actual tax payments. So because of the changes that have taken place in revaluations and the significant increases people have seen in their tax bills, there's just a lot of talk and information out there about what that means and how much things have increased over time and things like that. And so what Tony did was put together a quick little model that would, if people are approaching you and saying, my taxes have gone up by X percent, this is an opportunity for someone to go online and on their Brookline database or their Hollis database, look up their taxes, input them, and see actually in one place what the increases and changes are. The top summary is just kind of a general summary for the 2015 to 2023 period. You'll notice a column for sum and a column for cum or cumulative. The only thing different between those two columns is the way the percent change from the prior year is calculated. The sum is adding up all those years of changes in taxes. The cum is the rate of change between the first year and the last year. And that results, those two items result in a change to what the average percentage change per year would be. So the next, I don't know whose taxes are represented in the top one, but Tony was approached by a community member, and some of that information is in here. You'll notice it drops a year off just because of information that was available, and just takes another person's view. So one person's view of 2015 to 2016 is a 1.9 to 2.2% annual change, not adjusted for inflation, and for someone from 2016 to 2023, that percentage shifts between 2.9 or 4%, depending on how you look at the percentage changes. Did I basically cover it?
Yeah, that was a good round, explanation. I don't know if you want me to add to it.
If there's anything you'd like to add.
Something like this makes it very easy for people to plug things into a spreadsheet and see very quickly what the tax impact was on that particular individual. And giving that a range between maybe 2.5% to 4% is something that will kind of fall out depending on every individual circumstance. But if you have something like this, it's very easy to see that over a period of 9 years, there were times where the taxes actually went down. The dollar amount went down, and then there were some years with it increased the minimal amount, and that you look at the overall average tax over that period to be very, very small. And that's the point we want to drive to, is that there is a good value for what it is that you get. The taxes that you pay didn't always go up. Sometimes they went down, and other times they stayed level. And of course, there'll be years, as we know this year, where we got very high inflation. But if you look at that 1 year as kind of out of the norm, then you can look at it and say, look at the average of what you paid over a period of time, and you'll see that it's within the range of reason. And then you can give other facts, like we turned back over a period of 10 years, like $15 million. And if you ever compared it against property values, the property values went up significantly higher than the cost of our tax burden relative to the school budget. So it allows you to build a case very actual. I mean, it's based on every one of these ones that I did, are based on the taxes, the actual taxes that you get billed in December, then back in June. So you add those together, you look at the cumulative totals of taxes over that period of time. You look at the rate of increase, the amount of increase, that's an actual number, dollars, and then it becomes very clear and visible that if you have a whole lot to complain about, you may be an outlier for some reason. I don't know, maybe you did substantial increases to the value of your property, added a wing to it or something like that. People don't usually tell you about that. But if you look at enough information, we're paying a reasonable amount considering what we get in return for that. This is a community where people move to because of the school system, as well as the environment, you know, hiking and trails and that sort of thing. But it's clear, it's here. And then I actually put in there what we also get from the state. What is the average tax in the state? What's per school, middle school, high school? What is ours compared to the state average? And we're lower by about, you know, $534 total over this period of time against the state average. And our increase over that period of time, like I say, it could be between two, and I had one person that was down about 2%, another one was about 3.8. The way that person would like to calculate it, but it was still, in my calculation, about 2.6. Depends on how you look at it, how you want to calculate it. But I think this would probably work out just for about anyone that you want to plug any
So-
information to.
I would say, so I am aware of the frailties and issues that surround disseminating a model. It'll appear on Facebook, it'll be misunderstood, people will put in different information, well, I got this, well, I got that, why is it that? I understand all of that, and for me personally, I'm not necessarily advocating this as, you know, something the budget committee needs to put out to say, hey, everybody, go back and look at 10 years. But I think it is a valuable tool if you're approached individually and are trying to clarify positions for people, you know, that might not necessarily be understanding their taxes. It could be useful for that purpose. So I'd welcome input on what other people think. I am not going to enter a debate on Facebook, no matter what people say or don't say. I'm not going to do it, and I save what our budget committee position is for public hearing and the annual meeting, and I'm going to leave it at that. So appreciate people's input.
Can I just have, this is really nice, Tony. And not sure who gets the credit for generating.
Tony.
It's really nice. Some is just the plus and minus. CUM, is that compounding?
Yeah, this was, some things that were added were really
Yeah.
good input from Darlene. And some is the total, and then you have
Some is the
cumulative.
total. The cumulative is the difference between the first and last year. It's not quite a compound annual growth rate, which is another calculation that could be added as well. There are people in the community look at things different ways, and so it's almost impossible to cover everybody's way of looking at this. So I would say the sum, that CUM, I'd have to come up with a better term for it, and the compound annual growth rate would be an additional calculation. Those would be like the three ways most people look at it, bearing in mind this is not inflation adjusted. If we were to then take that step and inflation adjust it, a whole other set of results would come out. That would lead to a whole other conversation.
It might end up negative.
Yes,
Yes,
it'd be very close, actually.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna work with Tony, we're gonna we talked about some format changes, just so that's a little bit easier for readability. But we'll clean that up, share it with you, and again, I'll appreciate any feedback anybody has on best way of managing it. I'm not, like, it might be something,
We could
I
do
don't
a-
know.
Yeah, we could do a sidebar, and I'd be glad to work with anyone and explain everything and anything that
All I would
could.
suggest is if you're gonna put it on Facebook,
I'm not putting it on
let
Facebook.
me finish. Pick some very specific individual ones to post that might be,
I did that, just let's see, an A and a B.
So,
Can I ask why you would do it on an individual's house and not on like a median?
no, we could do that too. It could
We
be,
could do it
yep,
on anything.
I'm
You
just,
don't
I'm
have to
just
meet-
wondering,
Yeah.
I feel like that would apply to more people.
yes. It absolutely
in that
would.
regard,
Yeah.
right?
The point we're
You know,
trying to make.
I
lo-
could,
The analysis is terrific. I'm just questioning whether we use a different basis
Yep.
or not to
and
make it more
it could be, it
universal.
would obviously be
Yeah.
different. This is, these are Hollis-based individuals. It would look different for
Yeah.
Brookline.
Yeah.
So having an example for Brookline as well.
Yeah.
I like your median approach, Tom.
My-
Yeah,
my-
but you have to
my
agree on what a
suggestion-
median is per year. Median changes from year to year.
But it's
Right.
recorded every year. We know what that number is.
True.
Median, as opposed to the average.
Or the average, just some base number
Something.
that represents
A
you know,
starting
a
point.
comparative point that everyone can reference
A
their own
neutral
house from.
benchmark.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you could do, well, I would say like a $500,000
Okay.
house is $750.
Which would be, right, the number that we use.
1.2 or 1.5.
Thank you, Raoul.
Something like
Thank
that.
you. Sorry to leave early.
But that's kind of how, most times when we analyze it, we look at that number
And
of
these
the,
were
either
actuals,
average or
and
median
there
house.
were a couple
Yeah,
of
on that
actuals.
point, I think the bottom line is what's important. The details, how we get there, whose example you use is kind of backup material. But the bottom line is, the conclusion from that analysis is that taxes haven't really gone up that much as people claim
Right.
they have, okay?
I'm just trying to reduce the number of
And the idea
questions,
here is to come up with some value.
the number of challenges you're gonna get on it, you know?
Yeah.
It's never ending.
I
Yeah.
know, it's always, someone's always gonna point something out. you know.
Yeah.
I like this, this is good.
okay, so we'll
Very
work on
black and
some of
white.
those
Thank you.
modifications and.
I apologize for leaving a little
You're
early.
not leaving early,
That's
No.
okay.
we're staying late.
Okay, thank you.
I
We'll see you soon.
I did also want to mention, we have, two people that would, I'm assuming, be running for their seats. That's Tony and Brian.
Yep.
The window for declaring your candidacy is open. So I would ask that you go to the SAU office, see Diane Levitt, who is the school district clerk. She works in the town clerk's office in Hollis. And I don't know, Brian, if you can go to the Brookline clerk?
Patty
I
Howard used
was
to do
Go
it.
to
looking at
Patty
the-
Howard.
Yes, yeah, I was
sorry?
looking at the SAU.
Patty Howard, who is
Okay.
the
Patty Howard's
clerk,
the
yeah, the
town
town
clerk.
clerk.
Yeah, I was looking at the SAU website, and the instructions were to you fill out the form and take it to your town clerk.
Okay.
Except for the last day, and the last day you have to fill it, go in person to the SAU office. But
Okay.
before
No, that's
then-
backwards. You can bring it to the SAU office any day but the last day. It has to go to the town clerk.
Last day
or
to the town
Or
clerk.
Diane in Hollis,
Can you
yeah.
download the form?
Yeah, it's on
I
the
think
SAU
so, yeah.
website.
Clerk records it.
Yeah,
If
I
you,
think so.
if you look at the SAU website for the co-op, and you go under the budget section for 2024, it's one of the forms in the budget section for some reason.
And both of those are three-year terms. I know we had
Yeah.
some members that were finishing terms and things like that.
But
These
now
are
we're all
for
caught
full
up, yeah.
three-year terms. Okay. I think with that, as I mentioned, the February 19th public hearing will represent our February meeting. So I do plan on sharing, as a result of what we talked about tonight, an update to this format, the draft public hearing deck, and please, please, please provide me any questions or inputs of information that should be shared in a different way or needs to be added. It's-
The one you sent out, is that proposed for this coming year?
That's last year's.
That's what I thought.
Last year's final deck.
That's what I thought, okay.
I'm working on the updates now, but,
No, I just
Yeah.
wanna make sure I didn't read it wrong.
no, it was last year's. Again, it just gives I've pretty much used that format, but I'm open to input, and what kind of isn't relevant anymore, just doesn't kind of, go over well or whatever, so.
Wouldn't, maybe I'm throwing myself off now because I've been jumping around so many different things here the last couple of months. When do we sit down and make our recommendations on the warrant articles? I thought
At the public hearing.
in February?
Yep.
I thought we did that in January because it's
No.
way too late for like the town reports by then.
Usually
No.
our public hearing is like that first week of February. It's later this year.
Well,
Right.
Okay, so
It
it's
is
not going
later.
into the town report.
No, it should be able to, I
The
believe.
recommendations can't.
Well, I don't know about Brookline, but Hollis, they can.
Okay,
When's Brookline publishing, do you know?
like in a couple of weeks.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, like the final deadline's like in a week or so.
Really? That's not what I,
No, that's
it
what,
to be.
that's what it is for the town. Maybe the school part can be
No, it's
different,
just-
but
it's
I
the
don't think
same
so.
It's-
report, yeah.
Who do you deal with for that?
Well, I have
it
not
Scott?
actually got the deadline from Scott Butcher,
Yeah.
but I know is there should be plenty of time. There should be more time than what you're talking about. So
Interesting.
Let me,
All right,
let me
that's
talk
fine.
to Scott and find out what's going on.
Just so I jot it down, the public hearing is gonna be at the high school or the?
Right here.
I
Okay.
do seem to remember the schools having more deadline than the towns do, and that may be because of formatting and things that the
Well, I
town needs
know-
to do. So there could be other
I
things
know
with
for
that, but that's
Brookline,
fine.
one of the things is they have to get stuff in early, not because of the publication, but because of the SB2 calendar.
Could be, could be.
Yeah, I don't know that,
Yeah.
I got the impression that the deadline was earlier as well, based on what Eddie was telling me
Yeah.
when he had to get the thing done for Melendi Pond,
Yeah,
but,
yeah, our dates are traditionally usually in January, mid to late January. But
So,
I
but
do
to
recall the
answer-
schools having a bit longer, though.
Well, but to
Oh,
answer
whatever.
to answer your question, though, if the deadline is such that they need it before, then the recommendations won't be in there
Won't be
yet.
in there, yep.
What is the date of our meeting? Is it the 13th or the 14th?
For the annual meeting,
It's
No, the public hearing.
it's,
the public hearing's the 19th.
It's the 19th. It's listed in the calendar as the 14th,
Which calendar?
the SAU calendar.
I have two entries on my calendar, one for the 19th and one for the 13th.
I had the 13th on mine.
You see, it's so
Yeah.
funny. you
Where-
said
where did
this,
the
because
13th
that's what our
come from?
minutes said, and then the last calendar that came out said the 19th.
well, to
Because
be
I think,
fair, it was something a long time ago.
Yeah.
That's not the 19th, and then we had all this controversy, and we finally landed on the 19th, so.
Yeah.
perhaps-
Okay, so it might have been the
13th as a
13th at one
BudCon
point.
meeting and the 19th as the hearing.
no,
Okay,
No, 'cause I
Okay,
think
so
it-
there's
like I
nothing
said,
on
at
the
one point in time it
13th
was
then.
showing
I'm
on the
sorry?
13th.
so there's nothing on the
I think it
13th.
was, yeah.
Not for the co-op,
Okay.
no.
So the
Delete.
13th is deleted, right?
Yes.
Not doing anything on 13th related to
Right.
BudCon.
Not
Right.
for, yeah, not for this
Ooh, one
body,
free
but
night.
that happens to be the public hearing for the
Yeah.
Hollis School District.
Yes,
The-
it just changed that, yes,
Yeah.
it did.
All right, so the 19th with the 20th as being a snow date. I
Yes,
think.
correct.
Great.
Okay. So with that, I'll look to Mr. Rowland
I did have the
for
warrant
input this
article
evening.
on the
Great meeting.
13th. That was canceled.
Tremendous amount of
Was here that night.
information. It was a fire
The
hose.
warrant article was
And
scheduled for the
I think
13th.
Tom did a
That's
fantastic job presenting it. The questions asked
The
were
warrant article
concise
for
but
13th.
pertinent,
February
and
13th.
I appreciate some of the input we got from
Well,
the-
it may have
the,
been at one
committee
time, but
members
it's not now.
on,
It's,
some new
the
ideas, ways to look at
19th is
the,
definitely the public hearing, if
Great.
that's what you mean by warrant article.
Okay, so at 8:55, I will take a motion to adjourn from
Is it from me?
So moved.
Ryan, seconded by Tom.
Seconded.
Whalen, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Always unanimous. 600, noting that Raul left at 8:50 this evening.
All right. And thank you, Tom, an
Thanks
excellent
very much.
presentation
Yes, it was
and
excellent.
excellent discussion.